Center Major League Baseball has canceled the start of the regular season after the owners and players union failed to reach an agreement on a new CBA deal. The deadline was 5 p.m. Eastern today. The first two series have been canceled, a total of 91 games. We heard from Major League Baseball's Commissioner Rob Manfred earlier this hour. Now we have live coverage. The players union responding. Here's Union President Tony Clark.
Evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. Today is a sad day. As a former player, as a fan, for our game, today is a sad day. We came to Florida to navigate or to negotiate for a fair collective bargaining agreement. Despite meeting daily while here in Florida, there is still work that needs to be done. We are seeking improvements to our CBA because significant improvements are needed. We've made no mistake about that fact over the course of the last 3 or 4 years based on what we've seen on the field and off the field. It's against that backdrop of growing revenues and record profits for owners in the league that players seek and deserve nothing more than fundamental fairness. Players want to play. We all know that. But the reason we're not playing is simple. A lockout is the ultimate economic weapon. Let me repeat that. A lockout is the ultimate economic weapon. In a $10 billion industry, the owners have made a conscious decision to use this weapon against the greatest asset they have, the players. But the group won't be intimidated. I've seen more unity over the last few years than at any time in our recent history. Our guys care deeply about the game, care deeply about the fans, and care deeply about our player fraternity. And they are focused on improving the rights and benefits for today's generation of player and for the generations to come. Needless to say, we remain committed to the bargaining process and getting back on the field as soon as possible. Sylvia, are we opening the floor?
If you have a question, if you can approach the mic and ask.
I guess this is for anyone who wants to answer it. I mean, you guys knew coming in this was going to be contentious and they weren't going to kind of roll over for you. But was there anything about the way the owners approached this or their priorities that surprised you and complicated this even more than you thought?
Thank you for the question. And I suppose I should have introduced the folks that are here on the dais. To my right, Andrew Miller. To my left, Bruce Meyer with the PA, and Max Scherzer on his left. In regard to the process and what we've seen, the entire process has been an interesting one, to say the least. In a world where you are looking to make changes, make adjustments, make improvements based on what it is you're seeing, you understand that you need as much time as possible to work through those things. It's why we started the process when we did in April. It's why we made the core economic proposals that we did in the first part of May. It's why we remained available, whether on Zoom or as the pandemic afforded us the opportunity to meet in person. We made ourselves available then. It's why we sequestered ourselves in a hotel in Dallas with the hope of working toward an agreement. It's why we stood ready for 6 weeks after the lockout on December 1st, ready to have a discussion. It is remarkably interesting against the backdrop of the things that needed to be worked through to find ourselves on February 28th, over the course of the last week in West Palm Beach, working through the issues that, quite honestly, needed to be and could have been and should have been discussed in more depth much earlier than they were.
Guys, Tony, in light of your comments, and for any of you, there clearly was some progress made, movement made these last couple days. How far away do you think you are from a fair agreement?
We have work to do. The time here has been productive from the standpoint of having, again, conversations and dialogue that could have been had sooner. And I say that not because the issues aren't challenging. I say that because we've been committed to having those conversations since day one. So again, us being here over the course of the last week, productive conversation. We look forward to getting back to work at it as soon as possible.
And if I could ask a follow, we've kind of all seen this storm coming for quite a while. There's just been a lot of rhetoric both ways. And I'm wondering if you feel now that we're here at this bad place, whether anything could have been done differently on your guys' side to avoid this.
Being done differently other than being available and making sure that the concerns that we had and the adjustments that we were looking to make were on the table as early as humanly possible to give us as much time to work through them, yeah, I wouldn't have changed any of that. And let me say this too. Games were canceled today. We have a number of players that are here to my left, and I'm grateful for them being here. And they represent a much larger group that is out there. During the course of a player's career, you only get so many opening days. You're fortunate enough to get one in the big leagues. If you're an average major leaguer, you might see 4 of them. Having an opportunity to play as long as humanly possible and find yourself in a world where now for the second time in 2 years, the schedule is shorter than it otherwise should have been or could have been, is a problem.
Thank you.
You have a question on the phone from Maureen.
It is Tony Clark, Union President, the reaction on the idea that baseball has canceled the opening 2 series of the season with no end in sight. Let's bring in baseball insider Jeff Passan here. Jeff, there's a lot to cover there from the comments there from Tony Clark, but he just talked about specifically the idea of you don't get a lot of opening days and the term of playing baseball for a certain amount of years. You don't have 10-year careers on average. So that's the advantage with the owners in a situation like this. They can wait something like this out as you miss game check after game check here. With that, how does this damage the players' union moving forward with this extension of not having continued talks?
That's a great question, Kevin, because ultimately this is going to be successful for the Players Association only if they have a resolute rank and file. If there are players who suddenly, after they miss some checks, start saying, well, this is unnecessary, we don't need to be doing this, if there's factions that are splintering inside of the union, then that's going to be a big problem for them. And it's why up to this point they've been able to get as far as they have. There were plenty of players out there, certainly, who in the back of their minds thought, well, yeah, I would rather be in Arizona right now. I would rather be in Florida right now. I would rather be on the field, starting my career, at the end of my career, in the middle of my career, making money, doing all of the things that players are supposed to do. But they listened to leadership, and leadership, whether it was Max Scherzer, Andrew Miller, Garrett Cole, or on the Players Association side, Tony Clark and Bruce Meyer, made sure to say to them, we are only as good as we are strong, and the strength got them to this point. The question is, will they remain as strong going forward now with games being canceled?
And one of the things that Tony Clark said, the union president, really stood out, this quote, he started this: the reason we're not playing is simple. A lockout is the ultimate economic weapon. When you hear that reaction to start the news conference, and then you heard earlier this hour, as well as at 5 o'clock, Rob Manfred, how would you compare both news conferences?
Well, it's interesting because remember, in the letter Rob Manfred wrote to fans right after MLB locked out the players, he called it a defensive lockout. He said it was essentially there to try and jumpstart collective bargaining, and then, of course, Major League Baseball for the next 43 days didn't make a proposal to the Players Association. And that's the sort of thing that really stuck in the minds of the players. I mean, there are all kinds of different examples and elements that players keep going back to. It's the 43 days. It's Manfred calling the World Series trophy a piece of metal. I mean, you can go on and on about the things that players are aggrieved about at this point. And what Tony Clark says is true, but we also have to understand, if Major League Baseball did not lock out, Players Association, there is a chance that eventually they could have struck. And we saw this back in 1994. MLB did not lock out the players, and they went to strike, and the World Series ended up being canceled. Now, Rob Manfred can lift the strike at any time, but of course at this point that's unlikely because, again, now that there are games to be missed, the players could strike for them as well. So it's one of those things where it's complicated, but in reality, it's quite simple. This was on MLB. MLB made a decision, and now the Players Association is trying to hold them accountable publicly for that.
You mentioned on a tweet it's a sad day in baseball, and let's just hope we have some more answers and they get back to the table later on this week. Jeff Passan on Major League Baseball canceling the start of the season. Jeff, thank you so much. Let's go to the NFL here, and of course, earlier today, Mel Kiper releasing his mock draft 2.0.